All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikki Kirk. I'm the Director of Community Impact and Strategic Investment with the Indy Arts Council. Our IDEA learning series today will be centered on embedding inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility in your strategic planning process. I'm going to keep my intro real quick so we can get to the meat, and our guests will introduce themselves today. So, but first, our guest speakers today, they know this topic very well. It's my pleasure to introduce Phyllis Boyd, the Director of Indy Parks and Recreation, who works to provide enriching experiences for all across the department's 214 parks and 11,608 acres of land. And Neelay Bhatt, founder and CEO of Next Practice Partners. He works to combine inclusion and innovation to help agencies prepare for what's next through planning, training, and technology solutions. In addition to leading the Indy Parks and Recreation's comprehensive master plan update, he is currently leading the strategic planning work for the Indy Arts Council, the Indiana Sports Corps, and the Central Indiana Community Foundation. So I will turn it over to them. Thanks.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm going to take a moment here to share my screen as well. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yes, but we see it in presentation slide. Oh, that's good. All good.
All right. Phyllis.
Well, we're going to introduce ourselves and just tell you a little bit about how we are here today. I'm currently serving as the Director of Indy Parks, but before that, I was in the nonprofit sector as the head of Groundwork Indy. And then before that, was in the for-profit sector, working as a landscape architect and planner. And so I've been really thinking about community and shared spaces and equity and inclusion and diversity for a very long time. So happy to be here.
Great, and I am Neelay Bhatt, and thank you, Nikki, for the generous introduction as well. In addition to that, I am a first-generation immigrant, but a longtime resident in Indianapolis as well, so this is now home. Former experiences include Disney, the Olympics, Super Bowl, and the NBA All-Star here as well, and a lot of park system as well as nonprofit planning, strategic and master planning work. And locally in the nonprofits here, I've been involved with the Immigrant Welcome Center, WFYI, and a few others over the years. So happy to be with all of you. I recognize quite a few faces. I see one, Kavita Mahoney, who straddled both the worlds. So I know I'm going to take all the chance to embarrass you here during the call as well, Kavita. So, first up with Indy Parks, I'll turn it over to Phyllis here.
Yeah, so Nikki gave you a brief overview of the Indy Park system. We are now actually 216 parks, and it's a very large system. And we're spread all over Marion County. And because of that, we are really embedded in different communities, and we have parks that range in size from small lots to, of course, Eagle Creek, which is about 5,000 acres. So a variety of spaces and places and offerings for a very diverse community.
And then from our standpoint, as we've already spoken to, we are based here and we do this all over the world. But what really drives us are the values leading with inclusion, innovation, and information to help bring about inspiration for change. Even as the term goes, the idea next practice is to move beyond the ways you've always done things, i.e. the best practices, to look at new ways of doing things and the next practices. And Nikki alluded to them. I'm not going to go into details, but these are just some of the quick snapshots of the places we've been involved in, both locally and around the world as a part of our work. So we'll switch over to really looking at IDEA in Indy Parks as well, leading with Phyllis.
Sure. So you can maybe go to the next slide, Neelay. Yeah, so, our mission is to provide enriching experiences for all. So that really is an indication right there that we're all about IDEA. And we have this mission because eventually where we want to get to is this vision of having a city where we're all living healthier lives, having inspiring experiences, and all our communities are vibrant across the city. So we redid our organizational values as a team, and inclusion is at the top there, but we're also about fun, and a piece of that is joy. We are all about working collaboratively and being stewards of our spaces and our communities, and of also the organization of Indy Parks as a sort of a resource for not just us now, but also for the city in the future. A real sense of wanting to have an equitable and inclusive park system undergirds our mission. And we spell it out, just that everyone deserves to have access to spaces that are safe and well-maintained and welcoming. Everyone deserves to have access to beauty. And as we were working on our comprehensive plan, which we called Indy Parks for All, we just were focused on how do we infuse it, every part of it, with IDEA as a just foundational piece. One of the things that Indy Parks did a couple of years ago was to really start to think about, if we're trying to be equitable and inclusive, how do we do that in a way that is kind of systematic? There are times, because we have limited resources, we have to prioritize where those resources go. And it's no secret that in the past, sometimes resources were allocated based on which community had the strongest political ties, which community had the loudest voice. And our approach to it has been to really look at the data around race and income in our county. If you look at this map, what you'll see are the dark areas going to lighter areas. The darker the area, basically the higher the race income score. And that means that there's a higher percentage of population of people of color, but also lower income. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the redlining maps of our city. And some of what you're seeing here in this map that represents today is a reflection of historic systemic racism. And so if you've all also used the wonderful tool at the Polis Center, Savvy, you'll also notice that when you do overlays of this kind, they coincide with other aspects of community like public health, infrastructure, and things like that. And sort of a key thing here is that you can use this sort of way of looking at our city geographically as a means of determining where the areas of greatest need are for many, many things.
So in addition to looking at Indy Parks as well, I want to share some examples of the work from both locally and around the country as we think of strategic planning endeavors for how each of you can be intentionally thinking of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility as well. And so the first one I wanted to start with is the Indy Arts Council right here. And a tip of the hat, to Julie and the entire team from the very beginning, Nikki, Anna, Kavita, now so many others as well, Melissa, where, inclusion, maximizing access, ensuring every voice was heard was the biggest focus there, right? Especially looking at the artist and the nonprofit communities and hearing from those on the ground as well. A big part of this, as we know, in our digital lives and in this world right now, is very much looking at digital outreach. And a component of this, if you are able to, as you look at your future plans, you should be thinking of, one, a web presence in addition to your own, because a large project site that's dedicated is different than having just an organization site where someone has to find ways to know what's happening and to be engaged. Ensuring it's multilingual. If you see on the top right, you see the Google drop down for select language. If you have not done this before, I highly recommend you do it now. It is a free widget for you to embed, and it instantly allows you to translate any website in 80 plus languages. To the left of that, you see the skip navigation button as well. That is based on guidelines for ADA accessibility and ensuring that even your websites are ADA accessible as well. There's a lot of guidelines for that. How many of you, a quick yes or no, maybe in the chat box, as much as you're aware, do you know if your website is ADA accessible or not currently? Just type in a yes or no. Okay. I see a couple of no's so far. I see a lot of no's or unsures as well. So what I'd suggest you go back to, and again, talk to the team, talk to the IT folks. If you have people on the outside doing this for you, talk to them as well. I know, again, Ellen mentions, yes, they have it as well. Talk to her too, and get a sense of what will it take to convert your website to being ADA accessible. It may be a little bit of a process, but it's really important as well as you think about this for maximizing accessibility, not just in the planning effort, but in just the way you do things. In addition to that, with the Arts Council, they were very particular and always ensuring that not only is every visual credited to the artist as well. If you see here on the top right too, it's H. Ward Miles being acknowledged. Every presentation we made, every visual in that is always acknowledged too. And also ensuring that as they've looked at scheduling meetings in the future, that especially the artists in the creative class are always compensated for their time as well as a part of those meetings. Those are some of the small gestures that really ensures that you hear all the voices, not just the ones that are free and able to attend or share their input as well. In addition to this, around the country, one of the plans we're doing right now is with the city of San Bernardino, which is one of the largest cities in America that just came out of bankruptcy. A huge low-income population, but as you can see, very heavy on arts and culture. And as a part of that, every public meeting we've done, every outreach we put out there has been in multiple languages. Even the focus group and the meetings we did, we, as a part of it, actually had sign language interpreters and ASL experts doing inclusion audits as a part of the work. That was to ensure that as we do the strategic planning work for them, how are we allowing for maximum access to those that may have different needs during the planning process as well? It wasn't just in these small closed group meetings. Even as we did all the public meetings as well, every meeting had interpreters in English, Spanish, and ASL. And this was probably my first ever public meeting where, as you can see, we had people applauding in American Sign Language, which I thought was really, really cool. In addition to that, and this is another plan we did in Fremont, California, which is in the Bay Area as well. This was my first ever stakeholder meeting entirely in American Sign Language. Farah on the bottom left was our interpreter. All the rest were folks from around the area as well that were community members, that were users, but often besides just having closed captions, were almost always on the sidelines of many of these input processes. And one of the things, as we did this Sparks Master and Strategic Plan for them, and you'll chuckle at this, the biggest need, one of the biggest needs they said they had was more pickleball courts. So, some of these needs are the same no matter where you go, but a couple of other things they shared with us during the planning process, which we would have never known otherwise. They have a large lake there, and they mentioned as they walked, jogged, took their dogs around it, etc., because they couldn't hear, they oftentimes had people, bikers, joggers, whatever, coming from behind them saying, coming through to your left, to your right, whatever it is, and they couldn't hear a thing. And best case, people might think they're rude. Worst case, they may actually get injured and hurt. So as a part of this, because of this input, now in every place, they had signs that said people that may be deaf or hard of hearing may be walking around here as well. And for those of you looking to further integrate some of these principles in your work, whether it's the events you provide, the spaces you design, whether it's arts, culture, theater, performing arts, any of that too or beyond, look up this resource called Deafscapes. And it allows and it provides guidelines and recommendations for how to design more inclusively, particularly for those that are deaf or hard of hearing. In addition to this, again, looking at how we can be more inclusive and equitable in the access, we had hybrid meetings, we had Facebook Live meetings, and because this was during the pandemic, through QR codes and apps, we were basically going where people were for them to give us feedback as well, directly just from their phones and not have to be in close proximity to anybody else. I share all these different ways because, not that you do it for any of the accolades or otherwise, but just a few months ago, this entire outreach process was awarded the most inclusive and innovative approach towards community engagement and outreach. And that's really the key as well. We had over a couple thousand people that were a part of this that allowed more of the community's voices to be reflected in the direction for the future. In addition to this, and this is beyond any of these strategic plans itself, any of you heard of this organization called Disney or Mickey Mouse by any chance? I'm probably going to say you all have. As a former cast member there as well, one of the big things that we've always been told and always was sacrosanct at Disney were the 4 keys to the kingdom. And it was always in that order: safety, courtesy, show, efficiency, right? First safe, then courteous, put on a great show, do it efficiently. Even Disney now has adapted and expanded its keys for the first time as well in recent past to now have inclusion as one of the keys as well as a part of this, right? And so this is really, again, going back to the intentionality part, how can this manifest even in the visuals that we use? As you think about it too, at the stores, they now have mannequins wearing hearing aids, right? What a beautifully inclusive gesture as you think of this, or even now mannequins in wheelchairs as a part of, again, ensuring that everybody that comes there feels seen as well. One other thing they've recently done is add this in terms of Star Wars themed wheelchairs too, but it ensures that everybody feels like a princess, and who doesn't want to be made to feel special, right? So these are the small things that, you say these are visuals and that's great, but just like Phyllis shared, the way Indy Parks lives out its values, it's not just equity statements on the wall. They are very, very committed to manifesting that. Similarly, in addition to these values, there was something that was out there. I want to show a quick 15-second video to you of how these values play out in daily interactions. Take a look.
Neelay, we can't hear the sound if there's any.
Let me share this again with sound as well, so you can see that too. Such a small, simple thing, but what a priceless experience for that child, right? So these are so many different ways in which it's not just even the planning efforts, which is critical, but also in how you represent your organization, your communication, even your staff, the way they interact with it is really, really critical. So all of this, want to bring it all together here with sort of looking at how the comp plan process, the update and the RFI request for information also incorporate all of this as well. Phyllis?
Sure. So we knew that if we were really wanting to create a park system for all, that a key part of that process of our comprehensive planning was going to have to be making an effort to reach as many people as we could. And I think this effort that we undertook with Next Practice Partners and Neelay and his team was the most inclusive, at least for Indy Parks, effort in terms of doing outreach and trying to hear from a diverse range of folks in ways that hadn't been done before. And I'll let Neelay speak to the ways in which we did that.
Yeah, and I think this works back on the outcomes, right? From the kickoff, that was clear from Phyllis and the entire leadership team that we're not doing it the way we've always done this, right? We have to hear from folks that we know use the parks and we never hear from, right? And so philosophically, I think Phyllis and the team helped make this push and change in terms of not expecting people to come to us, but going where people themselves already are, right? And that's where you see the website to Plan Indy Parks, which was a mobile-friendly, ADA accessible website. It was existing before, it was updated now as well. Online surveys, we had specific youth-focused surveys, a number of different stakeholder key leader interviews. Kavita, I don't know how much time you spent trying to schedule and get all these meetings done, but wouldn't have happened without you helping sort of project manage this as well. So thank you for that. A number of public input meetings with the youth at different schools, and for the first time, multilingual focus groups, multiple multilingual focus groups as a part of this as well. There were a lot of different partners, which was extremely helpful. We had the Immigrant Welcome Center. We had, as a part of this, the learning tree. We had engaging solutions and a variety of different ways. All of them played critical roles in helping us get to this maximum possible engagement. Just some
But
of
I
the
will say, I was
yes.
just going to say, one of the reasons why we knew we had to have this kind of really robust engagement approaches for this particular plan, unlike other plans, Indy Parks plans in the past, comprehensive plans, we really wanted to have input on programming that people wanted. This plan was not just about what are the capital improvements and physical improvements we needed to make across the system, but what are the ways that we wanted to activate those spaces, indoors and outdoors, with programming that served people that wanted to be in the parks.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, as we looked at sort of going where people are in a variety of ways, you can see the top left. We went to a number of IPS schools, and I can't tell you how much these teenagers will talk to you if all you do is walk in with cheese and pepperoni pizza. And they were so engaged and had such wonderful ideas. On the top right as well, we went to multiple neighborhoods with the learning tree, inviting, these kids from the neighborhoods to come share their input as well. The picture on the right here with Phyllis, Kavita, and I, that was a specific meeting on the South Side just with the Burmese Chin community and the community center, in person and online with an interpreter. We have the largest Chin population outside of Myanmar, outside of Burma, in Indy, and we've never had input from them before, right? So this was amazing to have them share so many things as well. The bottom left, in the center, that's Gurinder Hall, the CEO of the Immigrant Welcome Center. And they helped, again, bring people from 5 continents two different meetings as well at the community center on the south side at the central library for us to get input across multiple languages. And then again, as you see on the bottom right as well, we had a really fun group. Even with the mask, you can tell everybody is smiling as well as we go through the process to share input, right? So this was really powerful in terms of going to the neighborhoods, going to folks that otherwise won't be as engaged and reflecting their input. And one more step further, kudos to Phyllis, Kavitha, Isabel, the entire communications team too. For the first time in my 20 years of doing master plans across the world, we've never had this before. This is the planindyparks.com is the website. And if you see the executive summary through the Immigrant Welcome Center, we got the information on the 5 most spoken languages in Indianapolis, and the entire plan's executive summary is now available for everybody in 5 different languages for them to not only see their input, but see what the plan for the future is, right? So this was really powerful as we thought in terms of the engagement that goes out. This is, by the way, it's Mandarin, Spanish, Haitian Creole, Burmese, and English were the 5 languages we chose as well. And so that's really how we've sort of taken it forward. One other piece parallel to this too is with the Arts Council, we're getting ready to launch the most comprehensive arts and culture focused community needs assessment. That's going to be both for Marion County and all the donut counties surrounding us as well. We've never had input of that extent before. So that's going to be really powerful as we think of parks, arts, culture, sports, all of these things together to see how do we create this flourishing community as a part of this. So these were great as we thought of plans, but then Phyllis and Kavitha and the team to get a step further with the implementation side as well.
And so part of when when you're thinking about programming, you're thinking about the folks that attend programs, but then you also have folks that are providing programming. And so as we went through the process of the comprehensive plan and getting all this feedback around what kind of programs we wanted to see, we knew that within the Parks Department itself, we didn't necessarily have the capacity to deliver all that programming. So we put out a call for programming partners and got 132 folks and organizations responding. What we wanted to know was what program ideas did folks have? What programs fit into our 12 sort of core program areas? And then if there were programs that were already underway, were there program ideas that folks had, but they hadn't really started? What were their funding needs? And we're combing through this now. We've actually been able to implement a few things for the Eclipse program that we had a few weeks ago. And then we're engaging programming partners for our summer camps, and then looking to see, with the priorities and programming that have come out of the comp plan, what programming partners can we start to activate to meet the need that the community is telling us they have.
Yeah, and even this was built on what Phyllis showed earlier with the race income matrix as well. The idea was, again, ensuring there is a rubric in place going forward for both the needs of the community that are addressed and the demographics of the providers, geography, race, ethnicity, program idea, sexual orientation, all of those, that we ensure that the providers also reflect the community that they are serving as a part of this, right? So that intentionality that the team had as a part of this was really helpful in building this framework for the future. So, as we sort of wrap this up and turn it over more to questions and discussion as well, wanted to see, Phyllis, from your standpoint, what are some calls to action you have for the audience?
I think one of the things that I still feel like I need to have is a learning mindset, a growing mindset. So not to think that just because I'm a Black woman coming into this space, that I actually know everything about IDEA, I don't. So being open to having folks tell me where my blind spots are and what I haven't seen, what I haven't considered. We're all probably very intelligent people, but there are just things we don't know that we just can't know. So be open, take critique with grace, and do what you can to make the world better. I would say the other piece is that as we do IDEA work, to do it in a way that is not superficial, to actually really dig in. It's not about tokenism. It's not about having this or that person showing up here or there. It's really about how are you creating spaces so that everyone can access the services that you have, the art that you have, the everything. So yeah, that's basically what I think about what we can do.
I'll maybe add a couple of things as I observed and saw as well, both with you, with Julie and the Arts Council team as well, CICF, all the others, Sports Corp. The more diverse the team that you have at the start of the planning process, right? That input reflects in the output you're going to get as well, right? So you can get all the diverse input from the external community, but if your team that's implementing it doesn't even reflect that sort of shared or varied lived experiences, it's going to be really hard for you to be able to truly empathize and act. So I see a lot of elements that how diverse the team was, age, race, ethnicity, gender, experiences, all of that, Phyllis, as you did, and as Julie is doing that as well, has been really powerful. And the other piece, I see this with IDEAs, there is never going to be an end, right? This is a lifelong journey. So to Phyllis's point, as we're learning, so often I see this in the training space, people bring us in for one day a year and say, train everybody, right? And then we'll see you next year. That doesn't change the culture. It makes you feel good for 2 hours. So this has to be about culture change as a mindset, not just checking a box, as Phyllis mentioned, which I think is paramount in the age we're getting into more with artificial intelligence, because the very basis of AI is input in, input out. So AI is only able to create things based on the input we have. And the reality is the majority of the input is very stereotypical and biased. I shared a couple other things in different presentations. When you ask for CEOs, 89% of responses were male, even though 25% of CEOs are female. When you ask for doctors, they mostly show men. When you ask for nurses, they show women. When you ask for certain other categories, they show folks that are white. When you ask for criminals, they show black and brown. These are very, very basic, but very consistent stereotypes. Our role individually has to be, as you start using more AI tools, as you start using that for marketing, social media, imagery, videos, whatever, is not to choose the image that reflects the stereotype. Because every time you do that, you are training the AI model that that is the right image of a doctor, a CEO, an astronaut, or whatever else. The more we input diverse inputs, the more we choose diverse outputs, the more we will normalize Black women being CEOs and brown men being NBA athletes, right? Which is not what you see as stereotypes again, too. So those are the things I would really encourage as we look at the future with technology, too, of ensuring that the IDEA principles are incorporated and very, very intentional. So with that, we're happy to open it up to questions, comments, thoughts that any of you may have.
Folks, you can feel free to unmute or put the questions in the chat. Sorry, I interrupted whoever was about to talk.
Don't speak all at once.
Hi, guys. Thank you,
Julie.
Phyllis and Neelay, for being with us today. One of the things that I really appreciated about the Indy Parks plan and approach is how you have engaged your team in the process, and specifically kind of not only in the input phase, but in the implementation phase and the training on the plan, and how that also is so important to, again, just bringing these equity practices forward, living the values, and helping the team really connect to those values and see themselves in the plan. Phyllis, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. I know we've got colleagues on who were a part of that too, but I just think that's an element that's really struck me.
Yeah, I think at different phases of the planning process, we really tried to engage staff, because what we wanted to have in the end was a plan that our staff embraced and that they used and that they saw as their guide, their personal guide for where the department was going and how they could fit into supporting the journey. So we surveyed staff just like we surveyed community members on things that they felt like were priorities for the department. But we also worked with Neelay and team to do an org culture survey, because we really hadn't taken a look at ourselves to see how our staff was doing, what they were thinking were areas that we needed to improve, and what their priorities were. And so I think as an organization that relies on our staff, which is our most important resource, to actually deliver the services, like, we've got to make sure they're okay. And we do have a very diverse staff. It is a really nice reflection of the city, but I will say that in terms of where folks are located in different parks, it is quite segregated. So one of the things we're doing is thinking about how do we actually have a more integrated staff across the system. And in terms of our hiring practices, we really looked at, and Kavitha was a huge part of this as a chief strategy officer for us and part of our DEI team, looking at what are the internal practices that Indy Parks needed to adopt to make sure that we were living IDEA. And so part of that was looking at our hiring practices, making sure that our hiring and review teams were diverse, that it wasn't ever just one person on the front end that was looking at resumes or applications and saying yes, no, interview, yes, no, that it was several people. So we've just really kind of tried to overhaul this institution to make it more diverse and equitable and accessible and inclusive. And so I don't know, I'm going to ask Kavitha, since she was so ingrained in all of that, if she wants to add anything, because I definitely am not going to take credit for all of that work.
Thanks, Phyllis. I think you went over pretty much everything that we did. I wanted to know a couple things that we did as part of the implementation. And I say we with my Indy Parks hats on, because I'm an honorary Indy Parks member for life. So
always and forever.
So when they did the org culture survey, they went back and presented the results to staff. So they gathered staff in a space together, and then all the leadership team had left the space, and staff were able to comment very freely in unpacking some of the content that came out of where those key barriers and gaps were in what staff were saying. And then furthermore, they took the comp plan. I was very determined to not have a plan, sorry for the siren in the background, have a plan that just sat on the shelf that people didn't use. But actually setting goals around the larger goals in the plan. So staff actually, Indy Parks does 2 staff conferences a year, and staff were able to sit down and look at the goals that were in the plan, and then think about their individual position and the individual park and communities that they serve, and create a goal that related to the larger goals in the plans. That's something that they could carry out. And we use the SMART goal format for that, so that it was not a lofty, but actually achievable goal. I think those are the only 2 in terms of implementation process that was really unique.
Yeah.
And I will add to this, because you mentioned the org culture piece to Phyllis. The Arts Council did the same thing as well, as has the Indiana Sports Corp, and we're about to do that for CICF. So there's also the advantage of that. Of course, Indy Parks went first, but now with the others, we can also share more comparable benchmarking to say for nonprofits, this size, more locally, nationally, is this a good number, or is this a cause for concern, right? So those were sort of some value adds as well, in addition to what Kavitha referenced with just the honest, transparent conversation that I think Phyllis, you, Kavitha, and the team empowered the staff to have. There's a couple of questions in the chat too, Phyllis. The first one, Lydia talks about with the Indiana Arts Commission, talks about the use of multiple languages in planning.
Mhm.
If you can share a little bit more how this impacted the implementation as well.
Well, when we went out to, so the website itself, the planning website, it had the ability to go into the 80 languages. So people were able to get into that and see what we were doing. I think, Neelay, you had mentioned that your mother actually was able to find like her language, and she was thrilled about that. So I think that there are all these entry points, and I know we did not get every entry point in. We did not have necessarily a way to include folks that were hearing or visually impaired. So there are some things that as we move forward, we've got work to do. But in the terms of languages, the website itself, just having, I mean, I was blown away that I tested it because I just wanted to see, like, really 80 languages? Come on. Like, it's going to have some like weird, strange stuff. And I looked at a few things and it was like, okay, actually, you can go in here and really hit 80 different languages. And that was amazing. And then with our current, when we thought about the executive summary, we knew we couldn't necessarily do 80 languages for that, but the idea of a park system is that it's for everyone. And if you want to have folks really embrace the system and the parks and really feel like their input counts, they've got to be able to access the plan as much as we can make it accessible. And it is a plan that is for not just the department itself as our guide, but a plan that shows our community where we're headed and what we're trying to do. And it provides people the ability to tell us if we're heading in the right direction or not, or where we need to change. And I'm committed to trying to make it as accessible as we can. I don't know if that answered your question, Lydia.
And Phyllis, Nikki had a question as well.
Okay.
So you actually answered a lot of it because I typed it as you were starting to talk about some of what you were doing internally. I am curious about especially like supplier diversity and things like that.
Yeah.
If you were able to touch any of that, and if so, what were you able to adopt, or what kind of practices do you have in place now?
We do a review as a city. We look at our procurement, and we've been working with the Office of Minority Women in Business Development to try to increase our numbers. When we are doing like design work these last few years, we've exceeded the city's goals for inclusion. Construction, not so much, but we're definitely trying. And one of the things that we started to do was to have the process is not as I'll just say accessible, or in terms of if you're a contractor and wanting to find out about a project, you've got to be on a mailing list and then you get a notification. But to find the site to get on the mailing list, it's not intuitive. And usually I'm sharing that, like the web address, with folks so they know where to go to sign up for the newsletter to get bid notifications. So what we wanted to do, because actually by that time, once that bid notification comes out, if you don't have your ducks in a row, it's really hard to respond and put in a proposal in time. So what we tried to do is actually the last couple of years, because we knew we had a lot of projects coming in the hopper, was to have open calls for interested consultants and contractors, and to just go over the projects that were in the next couple months going to get released for bid, so that people could think about, oh, these are the trades that I need to make sure I've got on my team, and to start doing their outreach to get folks. And we also were working with the Martindale Brightwood CDC, and particularly for the Frederick Douglass New Family Center there, we had some on-site meetings to try to recruit laborers from the community, but also entrepreneurs that might not actually have gone through the process with OMWBD to be certified with the city as a MBE or any kind of XBE, but to get them engaged in the process and connected to contractors so that they could perhaps in the next round, or even just if they could fit in this particular construction project, get hooked up. And so we're just trying to catch people a little bit earlier in the process. And it's not something that the department has done before. And the Office of Minority and Women Business Development has been very helpful in helping us coordinate those outreach events.
Thank you for that.
I think Bonnie is asking about, is Indy Park still looking for program providers?
We are. I think we're going to be looking constantly. So you can contact me. Initially, I would say Kavitha, but she's no longer with us. So reach out to me, and I will get you. We have a form that we have folks fill out that gives us information about their program aspects, and then where geographically they might want to be implementing their programming. So yes, please send folks my way. I'm reading Marty's question. Tell me more about your question.
It's partly a question, but also a thank you for reminding me that there is data out there. Particularly our chorus wants to be connecting with more groups in the community that aren't our usual audience, but we're also aware that we can't just come in and set up and they will come. You know, that it's a question of who are the potential partners there in various parts of the community that we don't know. We don't know who we don't know.
Right, right.
But there are sources of information about who potential partners might be in these particular communities that we should start going to their events and, you know, understand more about what's happening in those communities. And so it was a reminder to me that there's a lot you don't know and that there's information available. You just need to dig more to find it.
And I think the Savvy tool is very user friendly, and there's just so much there. And as you start to make maps and make layers, it just tells you so much.
Thank you. And I just wondered if others in the group had some experience doing that, but thank you very much. It was really helpful to remind myself of that.
Sure, you're welcome.
At least the language translation was simply a Google Translate's free API that was embedded on the website. So it's a free tool through Google Translate. I will tell you now, there are AI-based tools that allow for translation during live events and speaking as well. The city of San Jose has just started looking into that. And when I was at TED in Vancouver recently, they have this tool called, and I'm putting this in the chat box, Panjaya.ai, which was allowing us to listen. It was beautiful. There was an artist actually who created art using gunpowder, and he would create these beautiful visuals in the sky as well. But he spoke to us 20 feet away from me entirely in Mandarin, and I heard his entire talk in his voice and his emotion entirely in English, all through AI in real time, right? So as we think of even these kinds of meetings, right, so often our non-native English speakers who may not have English fluency don't even come to public meetings unless there's an interpreter, that's there. These could help make so many of these interactions, as this becomes more mainstream, also more inclusive for them to be able to speak more fluently in their native language, and for us to be able to hear it and understand it in English. Liz, there's a question from LaShawn.
just going to read it out loud for the recording. Can you discuss any plans on integrating DEI principles into environmental sustainability programs with Indy Parks? And if you already have programs, can you please share?
I think one aspect of that might be how we look at expanding the park system and where we need to expand the park system. If you look at Trust for Public Land has a program called Park Score, and also the goal of like the 10-minute walk to any park. And as we look at where we fall short of our distribution and concentration, and those are the areas where we prioritize land acquisition, and also just if people sometimes say, oh, I have this great parcel that would be great for Indy Parks, and you all should buy it. Well, first of all, we don't have any land acquisition funds, so that's an issue. But even when folks want to donate property, we have to be sort of I don't want to say picky, but we have to be strategic about what we take on, because taking that on means we've also got then to maintain it, and we do have limited resources. And so if we're going to take something on, it is going to be with the lens of where do we need it the most, and where we need it the most often has to do with communities that aren't having access to parks. So yeah. I'm scanning this question for comment.
All right, we have about 5 minutes left. If there's any lingering last minute questions, feel free to come off mute or pop it in the chat. There's a question in the chat. Are there resources you recommend for an ADA survey of your website?
I am looking at that right now to see what might be a good one. There's a number of them, but here's one you could plug in your website name and just check ADA accessibility accessibilitychecker.org. There's a whole bunch of them as well that you probably can use and test in a variety of ways. Thank you, Kira. Glad you're here as well on the call. Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Awesome. Well, if there's no other questions, we can wrap up for today. Just some housekeeping things for folks. We have postponed our May IDEA series right now due to some panelist scheduling conflicts. So we will send more information about that at a later date. So look out for that. And we'll have more to come. We'll take a summer break so folks can and us we can take a hiatus and do some planning, and then we'll come back for more in late summer and fall. So look out for more there. But thank you so much to Phyllis and Neelay. Really appreciate that. Lot of information for us to all process and think about what that looks like for our organization. So appreciate you both.
All right, thanks all.
And thanks to you all for the opportunity and for what you do. So Julie, Nikki, everybody at the Arts Council, thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Take care.
Bye.